how do you become you? What would you call what you do if you had to give yourself like a title? And then how'd you become this?
Well, for me, I've always been just a curious person,
Yep.
and I like to look for answers, kind of discover the right answers. And if I'm researching something or investigating something, or as a kid, just asking a question and then searching for the answer, if I never got the answer, I never stopped searching. It was just kind of the way I was. And if I got answers from adults or authorities or teachers that I thought had the answers, and the answers weren't to my satisfaction,
Yeah.
whether it was even religious in nature, it just wasn't something that resonated with me. I would never stop the investigation. And I always believe in human potential. It's just something that I always believed in. And I think for some of us to wake up, we need a wake-up call.
The story of Joe Dispenza. In 1986, Joe Dispenza was hit by a truck during a triathlon race. He was on the bike ride part. He was coming around this bend, and there were two cyclists on the corner. He looks up, and a police officer was gesturing for him to turn right and get past these guys. But the problem was that the cop had his back to oncoming traffic. So Joe spun, and out comes a four-wheel drive Ford Bronco, which hits him from behind, catapults him off his bike, and lands on his back. With this accident, he ended up breaking 6 vertebrae. He had bone fragments on his spinal cord, and the top 8 thoracic vertebrae were broken like a pretzel. The typical surgery for this is called a Harrington implant. In his case, they would cut off the tops of the vertebrae from the base of his neck to the base of his spine and screw stainless steel rods into him. The prognosis was that somehow he would be compromised for life, but they had also told him that if he didn't have the surgery, he would be paralyzed for the rest of his life.
If it was anybody else, and I saw the x-rays and I looked at the scans and everything, I probably would have recommended the surgery, but this was me, and I wasn't so quick to sign on the dotted line. So I had 4 opinions from 4 of the leading surgeons in Southern California, and they all said, Harrington rod surgery is your only answer. And so in 1986, it just wasn't common to go against medical advice. And so I decided to not have the surgery. And I just thought, well, there's an intelligence that lives within us that gives us life. And it's keeping our heart beating and digesting our food and organizing so many trillions of functions. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing anything. I'm basically laying face down and not moving a lot at all. And my life just came to a halt. And I said, well, since I'm not doing anything, well, let's see if I can make contact with it and give it some instructions, give it a plan, give it a template, give it a design.
The turning point. But why and how is it possible that Joe Dispenza decided to follow this philosophy of thought? Before the accident, Joe practiced 3 hours of yoga a day for years, had a martial arts studio, and was a student of the subconscious mind. So he knew pretty well about the power of the mind, but had no idea it could work to this extent. That was the time to see if he could take this knowledge to the next level. So he took everything he knew and just trusted himself, because he couldn't heal the spine him as a person. But this intelligence, if had received the proper information, it would have done it.
So 6.5 weeks of utter dismay, dark night of the soul. Couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do. I was all over the board. I was frustrated, angry, and things got worse. And then I wouldn't quit though, so it would take me hours to reconstruct my spine. And whenever I lost my focus, and I started thinking about living in a wheelchair, should I sell my home, should I sell my practice, I'd stop and start all over again, because that wasn't the image. Like when you're facing crisis, we tend to focus on what we don't want to have happen instead of what we do want to have happen. So
when you say you were reconstructing your spine, like what were you doing?
I was like, I was a little guy
Yeah.
with like a trowel, that was a mason, and I was kind of just running this trowel up my vertebrae,
Yeah.
and just reconstructing it. And I can draw T8, T9, T10, T11, T12. No, I can draw it upside down left-handed. I know those vertebrae sideways. So the problem is that I just couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted to do, and so it would take me hours to get through it. And then 6.5 weeks, it was just like I hit a tennis ball in the sweet spot. I hit a golf ball just right. Something clicked,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, what took me 3-4 hours to do, I was doing in 45 minutes. I was firing and wiring circuits in my brain. I was practicing being present and paying attention. And it's a skill. The more you practice it, I think the better you get at it. So then I started noticing significant changes in my body. I mean, big changes. My pain levels went away. I got a lot of motor function, sensory function back. I started feeling really good.
Yeah.
And then I started correlating what I was doing inside of me with what was happening in my body and outside of me. And then I was like a dog on a bone, and I just knew. I just started looking forward to doing it, and it just got better and easy. Anyway, 10.5 weeks, I was back on my feet, and just made a deal with myself that if I ever was able to stand up again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection, mind over matter. So what I do is I hopefully provide the proper information for people to transcend some limitation or some obstacle in their body or in their life.
Dispenza's discoveries on the new science. The question is, how did he rebuild his spinal tissue? His personality led him to examine the mind-body connection, so he began researching in the traditional science. And though he has a decent scientific background, he couldn't find the answers anywhere in conventional textbooks. It's only when he started looking at epigenetics, at neuroplasticity, at the quantum model of reality, that he suddenly started to realize that there's a whole other realm to science. And so he started studying spontaneous remissions, and he interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people around the world with similar stories to see what they were doing or what they did to heal themselves and defeat the odds. And what he discovered he managed to explain only in the following decades by directing scientific studies. And these are the words he himself uses to define his discoveries. The thoughts you have are an electric charge in the quantum field, and feelings are a magnetic charge in the quantum field. And how you think and how you feel, therefore your state of mind, emits electromagnetic energy that affects every single atom in your life. The thought sends a signal outward, and the emotions pull the experience of that thought towards you. So if a person lives in anger, impatience, resentment and frustration, and tries to hold on to a vision of a positive future, then the mind and body are in opposition. There is no vibrational connection between the future they want and their present, because they are asking, why hasn't this happened yet? And they're waiting for their healing to begin so they can feel gratitude. They are waiting for their success to feel abundant. They are waiting for a new relationship to feel love. And this is the outdated model of cause and effect. This new way of thinking about the law of cause and effect, and this approach to the traditional discoveries of quantum physics, led him to understand that there is an intelligence that underlies everything. And through the power of thought, we can collaborate with this intelligence, even to rebuild the tissues of the human body.
Yeah, first thing is that most people believe that there was an intelligence that lived within them, not outside of them, that was a resource if they could connect to it, just like I did, and begin to allow it to help them heal, it would be important. So there's nothing mystical about this intelligence, and some people had a religious take on it, some people just a spiritual take, some people were just pragmatists that they just trusted. The whole thing was that on some level they thought that they had contributed or they were responsible for their own health condition. That the 10 years of living in stress, and living in stress is living in survival, and stress, as you know, knocks the brain and body out of balance. And it's a scientific fact that the long-term effects of the hormones of stress downregulate genes that create disease. So people spend 70% of their life living in survival, living in stress, and no organism can live in emergency mode for that amount of time. And certain emotions that we feel when we react to people or conditions in our lives, that emergency state, the arousal of the brain and body, drives us to very primitive behaviors, primitive thoughts, and they became aware that they had to stop being that person. That's a very important thing. They had to break the habit of being themselves. And that's significant because they're not relying on now any drug, even though they're treating with drug or treatment or surgery, that they're all of a sudden taking more responsibility of paying attention to how they think, noticing how they act or how they speak, or looking at how they feel and stop blaming. They had to break the habit of being themselves. Third thing I thought was so fascinating was that they had to reinvent themselves. And they started thinking, well, God, if I had a chance, another shot at life,